Welcome to Fuck Your Life Up, a podcast about what happens when you blow up the life you had to build the one you actually want. Each week, we share updates from our own journeys, including flipping a house together, and have conversations with other life flippers about living without a blueprint and choosing freedom even when it's fucking scary. Today we are going to get into Katie Darrell's story, somebody who had her life flipped for her. And we're trying to convince her to come to our dark side. that you know we can make this a positive for her. So Katie, and going into your background a little bit, I noticed that you started hosting radio at 15. Is that right?
Yeah. Child labor laws back in the old days were less strict than they are now. I did. I started in radio. There was this kids radio station that was launching nationwide, and there was a division of it in Phoenix that was launching. And they basically wanted a kid DJ, one for each day of the week, Monday through Friday. And so they held like local auditions, and my dad read about it in the old timey newspaper and said, "Kid, we should bring you to these auditions." And I auditioned and ended up getting the gig. And so I would go in after school. I was in high school and DJ from 3 till 5, one day a week. And there was an adult in the room. And so we kind of had this co-hosty thing. And this was before even Radio Disney existed, right? So, but this guy, his name was Matt. He was awesome. And since I was one of the older kids, because some of the other ones were more junior high and I was in high school, he took me under his wing and taught me the ropes of, the adult job at the radio station, like running the board and like recording like the weather, and doing, programming stuff. He was doing this selfishly though, because his wife was about to have a baby and he knew he was going to be taking some paternity leave. So then he was like, "Hey, by the way, can you cover my shifts and be the host with the kid co-host for like the next 2 weeks?" And I did. And so I was in radio for several years, even, when I went into college. And then I made a jump to television. I went and covered the presidential election of 2000 for MTV for their Rock the Vote and Choose the Lose show. So I got to like ride on the Straight Talk Express with Senator John McCain, RIP. I got to interview Al Gore, which is like pretty cool. And so I did that for a year. And then it was a year contract with MTV because it turns out like a presidential election only lasts that long. So when that contract came up, I went back to radio and started doing shock jock radio. And that was really fun. Howard Stern was on in the morning, and then my show came on in the afternoon, and it was all talk radio, and it was weirdness, and it was Hooters food delivery in the afternoon with girls in bikinis, like all of it, like everything you imagine about shock jock radio. Like, yeah, it was rad. We got fired, as all shock jockers do, right? And I found myself in Dallas. And so that's where I was during that shock jock stage. And Mark Cuban was starting a basketball show. And I got hired to co-host a basketball show with Mark Cuban. And at that same time, and I did that for 2 seasons.
Did you know anything about basketball?
And no, I mean, I knew the rules. That was the great thing, is like, luckily I've always been a well-rounded, sports educated gal. So I understand the rules and like what's going on. I did not have an obsession with the Dallas Mavericks. Had been going to some of their games. And what's really funny, you guys, and I know, Crystal, because you're our woo-woo in resident here, is the manifestation, right? Put it out in the universe and it will happen. I remember when I was in Dallas, and this is when I had the radio show, and before I was working for Cuban, I went to a Dallas Mavericks game, and I was on a creepy date, as most stories with me will start. So I'm on this creepy date, and they're good seats, and the guy is like, "Oh, that's Mark Cuban." And I'm like, "Who's Mark Cuban?" He's like, "Oh, he's the owner of the Mavericks. He's really been shaking it up." And I mean, you guys, this is circa like 2002, right? Like, this is before Shark Tank. This is basically right after he had brought like Dennis Rodman onto the team just as a PR side, and people were like, "Who's this owner that's crazy and gets fined?" Right? And he's like, "Yeah," and he's telling me all this stuff about him, and he gets fined and he gets in trouble, and he's just like this badass. And I was like, "Cool, going to work for him. And
you like edge. I like that. Did you always know that about yourself, that you kind of like sort of edgy people that are right in the fringe?
Oddly, my second manifestation. The first one was the MTV job. I was going to school at Arizona State University, and I was at the Walter Cronkite School for Broadcasting. I'm fancy like that, which is adjacent to the Hugh Downs School of Journalism. And so there I am in broadcasting class, and they're like, everyone, what are you studying? And, what do you want to be? And, this girl's like, I want to be a weather girl. And this person's like, which I did go to weather school, by the way, at one point.
Amazing.
But, oh my God. You have so many good stories.
Yeah. And then this person's like, I want to be the GM of a radio station. There's all these things. They're like, Katie. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'll be like an MTV VJ. And then less than 6 months later, I was moving to New York to go be on air and like fill in on TRL doing the news and stuff. So, so that was my second manifestation with Mark Cuban. And so I ended up co-hosting this basketball TV show with him. And as I was sitting there with him on like the second day, he's like, oh, well, I'm starting up this TV network. It's all high definition. If you have any ideas, let me know. And I elevator pitched him a show the next week. And he said, sure, come on board. And I created the first weekly television show for his network, HDNet, which was the world's first high definition TV network. No one had high def in the day. People were like, why would I get rid of my totally good standard def TV and buy a new one? Like, what's up with that? And so I was working with him on the ground floor, creating programming that would lure people over to the world of HD. Wow. I worked for him for 22 years. In that time, I had a bunch of other cool side gigs, being a music commentator for VH1. I helped launch TMZ on TV. A lot of cool things, because Mark Cuban was very just like, hey, as long as you get your work done, like go runneth in the fields. He sold the company circa 2019. And I got a great promotion and became the vice president of programming and content for the television network. So I was in charge of creating and looking for rock and roll music TV shows and picking the talent to attach to them and host some of the shows. So on camera work too. Like, what a dream. Everyone's like, what's your dream job? I'm like, I have had my dream job. I've gotten to interview the Go-Go's and Stan Lee and, Ted Nugent and Tommy Lee, and just have like so many cool things. And at one point I had an adventure show for the network where I would go and like skydive in a bikini. Like, yes, Google it. I've done it all. And the new people came on board, and finances, I guess, as they do with linear programming, went a different way, and they halted all production last year, and they laid off basically everyone. There's a couple people in there, I think, turning on the lights and press and play each day. Yeah. And so I got laid off. And so I got my life effed up for me. And I've been struggling with that since, trying to be like, what do I want to be when I grow up, when I already did what I wanted to do?
Wow. I want to go back to the beginning. When did you know that was your dream job? And like, did it just kind of develop over time, or did you visualize it from an early age and then just pursue it?
Like, were you already interested in radio when your dad said, like, this is for you? Like, had you been expressing that? Or
so
was
I grew up as a kid, a theater kid, right? So I knew I liked performing, right? Mm-hmm. But I was in Phoenix, Arizona. Like, you're not going to get hired by Nickelodeon or the, Disney Channel and all those things. Like, so I kind of figured, and I wasn't really good, and I can't sing. So I knew I was like, child acting wasn't the way, and I knew I wasn't going to like move to Hollywood to like try and be an actress. That didn't feel, but I knew I liked commandeering a room. I liked talking. I liked the attention. I liked presenting. I liked being a storyteller. And so I think I didn't know what I wanted until he did kind of present this. And I was like, well, this is fun. And I did it. And I was like, this is really interesting. And then I thought, well, what's the next gateway thing? Maybe I could do like, maybe I could be on the news or something like that. And so it started out as kind of like gateway things. And so then when I went to Arizona State studying, broadcast journalism, and then when I found out MTV News was hiring for someone like a college kid to, help with the presidential election, like that was the next progression. And Yeah. So it kind of, I mean, I didn't start out wanting to interview rock stars, but I quickly was able to pivot and see that as something I was good at, having the music radio background too, as well.
Yeah, I mean, you really did forge an unconventional path.
Mhm.
And so and you've done so many different things that I'm hoping that in this new era of your life, that keeping your mind open to things will, provide opportunities, which is sort of how you and I started talking about doing the house flipping. Can you talk about like the process for how you kind of came to that idea? Like
Yeah, I mean, I
previous
kind of
home
was just
ownership,
thinking
that kind of
I
thing?
want extra cash,
Yeah.
right? So when I started talking to you, I think was I still employed or had I just been freshly laid off? I can't
I
remember.
think you might have still been employed.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
And I've just been thinking, listen, I was the vice president. Like
Yeah.
with that comes a decent paycheck, gals.
Mhm.
And I've always been a saver. And so,
Mhm.
even with any promotion I've gotten my entire life, I've still always tried to live off of that original paycheck, which drives my husband crazy. He's like, we're not poor. And I'm like, I don't know. We should reuse that Ziploc baggie. You never know. So, I always did my due diligence with the 401k and the
Yeah.
529 and then saving money and just, monitoring things. And I just thought, well, what can I do to kind of make that money work for me a little bit more,
Mhm.
a little harder? And I had always been interested in real estate flipping because I'm going to vomit in my mouth right now when I say this because the name. But I remember like Trump back in the 80s being like, real estate. I took advice from Donald Trump, who was failing in his real estate.
I don't think it actually worked out for him on paper, but
But for some reason, as a child of the 80s, you always knew like
yeah.
real estate was the jam, the
Yep.
cats, meow. And so I was like, well, maybe I should get into this real estate thing. Now, mind you, when my husband and I bought our house, we had a condo before, and we were fortunate enough to keep the condo, and we have a tenant. So I've gotten a taste of being a landlord.
Mhm.
We had to do some remodeling in this house. I got a taste of like, what's that all about and the chaos. And I thought,
Yep.
okay, I think I could do, flip another house. Or even at one point, I was like, it doesn't even have to be a flip, just a reno, and maybe, turn it into another rental property. And you had mentioned, Sam, something
Mhm.
about that. And I was like, cool. Well, maybe I'll take this money out from under my mattress and invest in something with Sam. And then the rug got pulled out from under me and I got laid off. And then all of a sudden, now you're like looking for a job, putting out applications, thinking about like working for the man and an unknown man. I mean,
Mhm.
not every boss is going to be as spectacular as Mark Cuban was. Going in 9 to 5, all those things. So I'm truly in the middle of a struggle of wanting to get back to something that feels stable, because for me, like, sadly, corporate feels stable, you guys,
Yeah.
because I did it for so long. Now I was in a corporate, as they would say, golden handcuffs situation,
Mhm.
because I didn't have to clock in, I didn't have to clock out, as long as I got my work done. I worked from home, I had a team that I loved and trusted, so it came with a lot of flexibility.
Mhm.
Disneyland Fridays and things like that, where you just disappeared and people were like, whatever, I'm not even going to question where she is, because she gets her work done. Now the idea of like having to go work somewhere and be accountable, that's scary. To wear kind of only one or two hats versus the 20 hats that I had been wearing at my old job. And like, I don't know. I'm in the middle of a big crisis.
Well, and I don't know that I can offer any advice since I made the choice to step away from my golden handcuff job. But I don't know, Crystal, what comes to mind for you when you hear all of, her concerns and thoughts about going from stability to instability?
Yeah. You guys are getting me fresh off some like very deep mental thought this morning. Here's what
You're not allowed to do shrooms before the podcast.
That's a new rule. You must, so that we can really provide our listeners some great insight. But this is what's been helping me, because all of our lives are very much in flux. You know, we all have these weird moving pieces. And what I've been thinking about a lot is what is the real life of my dreams, not the real job of my dreams. And I think we've talked about this a little bit, but as the children of the 80s, you know, we were sort of programmed, like everybody that asks us when you're a little girl, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's as if that's the only thing. And so much of all of us as ambitious women, so much of our personalities and our self-worth has been tied up in our job titles and how much we make and how much we're climbing. And I've been doing a lot of work internally to unravel that and really think about, has that really been serving me? And so I wonder if like, this was the universe's, you know, sort of gift to you. Like, Katie, I'm going to give you time to really think about who you are as a human and a woman and a person, not just as a worker. Yeah. And I wonder if like that would help you try to identify like what is right for you moving forward. You know what I mean?
I mean, 100% makes total sense. That like, you know what I'm having a hard time with though is now I'm an adult, and I do recognize like hopes and dreams don't pay the bills, right? So you know, I had that year. You know, living off severance, and now you're like, okay, now is the real time. We're going to be looking at savings, right? If I don't get a job, I can still daydream once I get a job, right? So I'm running up that, you know, thing of that I didn't figure it out in that year, and that's mostly my fault because I was panicking. There was at least 6 months of sheer panic. In a deep end, splashing myself in the face, being like, what's happening, and just spiraling. And even now, as I've kind of gotten my back to like a sane spot, it's harder to have those daydreams and want to pursue those daydreams that are riskier or maybe don't pay as much, knowing, well, this is how much my life costs now, even with reusing the Ziploc baggies. So I am struggling with that. And I think that's the struggle a lot of people, you know, can probably relate to is, I want to dream bigger. I want to dream different. I want to shake it up, but I got to pay the bills. And also, you know, how far can that hope and dream go beyond, you know, 2 years and 5 years? Like, we're still young. So I need a hope and dream that potentially lasts 20 years, right? So then I can retire. Because not everyone wants to be a constant flipper either of their life.
Right.
So I
wonder if those things can exist together. You know, I wonder if you can be actively thinking about picturing the life that you want and also paying the bills. You know, I wonder if like in this process for all of us, if sometimes you're going to have to maybe take a job that isn't, maybe it's not fulfilling every hope and dream, but it is fulfilling your hope and dream to pay your bills. You know, and maybe it still allows you, if you're prioritizing like really truly getting to what you want, maybe you really can do all these things in some way. You know what I mean? You know, maybe we won't be able to flip a house and make our millions, you know, before the clock runs out and it's time to get, you know, go back to like a more traditional job, but maybe it still can in some ways. You know what I mean? Like, I think your superpower, Katie, is like, you think outside the box. You know, you're able to do 5 million things, you know, and if anybody can walk this line of like moving toward the life that you want, it's you. I think like you are a visionary.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wish I could have a pep talk every day. So I might need you to record something.
I'm here.
You know, I think, you know, and again, we're trying to keep the episode short and we're never going to solve everything in each episode. I think with the takeaway that I want to take, you know, two takeaways, right? What are our lessons? What did we learn today, guys? Right? You know, one is, Crystal, I really liked, what is it? What was the phrase? Dream of the life you want, not the job you want. Wait, what was it?
Yeah. I don't know. That was it. That was
the life you want, not the job you want, or
something along those lines.
Yeah.
Picture the life you want, not the job you want.
Thank
Right.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I need to sit pen to paper or daydream to the clouds a little bit stronger on that. And maybe that will help me have my manifestation.
Mhm.
And I think patience, patience and focus, and being scared is being okay. Those are
Yeah. I
But
think
maybe
it's harder.
when you move out of scared. Like you don't have anything to be afraid of, Katie. You can handle this. You are handling it. And you can
There
handle
was
what
a time where
comes
we did more with less, in our 20s. And
Yeah.
to your point earlier, Katie, that as we get older, our life costs a certain amount of thing, and now we have children and
yeah,
like
you got to think of
other things
college,
to
right?
think
I'm like,
about and less time, right?
Mhm.
And taking risks feels scarier for sure. But that's why you have a community, right? Like that's why you have friends. That's why you have other like-minded people to go to kind of bounce these things off of and feel heard, seen, and get new ideas, inspired, all of that. So that's why we're here, right? Like that's
Yeah.
also why we're doing this podcast, because we started
Yeah.
talking about all this stuff and we said there's something here. It's not just us experiencing this. It's many people and in different facets and scenarios, not just choosing to flip their lives, but having it done to them. So I really appreciate you sharing your story today, Katie. I know this wasn't what you chose, but I'm hoping that you're inspiring some people and that we can find a new direction.
I'm inspired. I'm very
Yeah,
inspired.
seriously.
I
Me
love that
too.
story.
Me too. That's all we have time for this episode. Follow us on F Your Life Up Podcast on all social media platforms and send us any questions to fyourlifeuppod@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody. See you next one.